The rattle in the diesel engine wasn't what caught my attention first this time. It was the way he already had the stretcher half unloaded before I'd even parked. I'm Marisol Vega, and I run nights for a private ambulance company that services 3 counties around Tucson, which is a polite way of saying I drive a lot of empty highway between calls that actually matter. 4 years on the job, and you develop a sense for when a scene is routine and when it isn't. This one felt routine. Elderly man, chest pain, modest ranch house with a garden gnome missing an arm. Right up until I saw the fire truck already parked crooked in the driveway, lights washing red across the stucco, and a particular set of shoulders climbing down from the cab. Cole Ferris. Search and rescue out of Station 9, the unit that covers the mountain trails and the wash when it floods, which meant he had no earthly reason to be first on scene for a cardiac call in a residential neighborhood 4 miles from anything resembling a canyon. You're a long way from a trailhead, I said, snapping on gloves as I came around the rig. Mutual aid, he said, not looking up from where he had his hands braced on the patient's shoulders, keeping the man calm and still with a low, steady voice that didn't match the urgency of the moment at all. 9 was short a truck. They rerouted us. Third time, I said. I'm aware. That was all we said to each other for the next 11 minutes, because there wasn't room for anything else. Not with an 81-year-old man named Harold gripping my forearm hard enough to leave marks and asking me, over and over, if he was going to see his granddaughter's wedding in October. I told him yes. You always tell them yes if there's any honest way to say it, and there was. Cole helped me get the stretcher through a doorway that was 6 inches too narrow for it, angling it with an economy of movement that told me he'd done this exact maneuver in 100 houses he'd never see again. And neither would we probably see this one again, and neither would we probably see each other again, except we had twice before, and now a third time, and I was starting to hate how much. My chest did something complicated every time I recognized that particular rattle in an engine. 3 streets away. I want to be honest about something, because I think a lot of people who've worked a job like mine know exactly what I mean. Coincidence is a word we use to protect ourselves from admitting we've started looking for someone. The city dispatches units algorithmically, mostly. Closest truck, closest medic. The odds of the same firefighter showing up on 3 of my calls in 5 weeks across a coverage area that large were not impossible. But they weren't nothing either. And I'd caught myself, twice now, glancing at the mutual aid board before shift just to see which stations were running thin. We got Harold loaded, and I climbed into the back, and Cole leaned in through the open doors for 1 second longer than the job required. He's got good color, Cole said. He's going to make that wedding. You don't know that. No, he agreed, and there was something almost apologetic in it, like he knew exactly what he was doing by saying something that wasn't procedure, wasn't protocol, was just a man trying to hand a scared woman something to hold onto in a moving ambulance. But it felt like the thing to say. The doors closed. We rolled. Harold made it, for the record, quadruple bypass 3 days later, and I heard through the hospital grapevine that he danced with his granddaughter in October after all, slow and careful, one hand on a cane. I didn't see Cole again for 6 weeks after that call, and I told myself that settled it, whatever it was. Coincidence exhausted, pattern broken, back to normal. I even started to feel a little embarrassed about how disappointed I was by the absence of a coincidence, which is its own kind of confession if you think about it long enough. Then came the flood. Monsoon season in southern Arizona turns dry washes into rivers with almost no warning, and the call that came in on a Thursday night in late July was the kind that made my stomach drop before I even had the address written down. Vehicle in floodwater, occupants unknown, wash rising fast off Sabino Canyon Road. Search and rescue territory. His territory. By the time I got there, they'd already pulled 2 teenagers out of a stalled sedan, and Cole was soaked to the chest, hauling a girl who couldn't have been older than 16 up the bank with a rope harness cinched around both of them, water dragging at his boots with a force that looked like it wanted to take his legs out from under him. I ran down with a blanket and got my hands on the girl the second he had solid ground, and for a moment, just a moment, before the adrenaline of the scene swallowed it, our eyes met over her shaking shoulders, and neither of us said anything about coincidence. There wasn't a rattle to explain this one. There was just him, standing in rising water at 10 at night, and me, meeting him there, and some current under the surface of both our jobs that had apparently decided the algorithm wasn't going to be the last word on the subject. We got both kids stable. Hypothermia, mostly, and one fractured wrist. Nothing that wouldn't heal clean. And afterward, standing on the bank while the water roared past us in the dark, soaked and shaking with cold and something that wasn't cold at all, Cole said the thing I'd been half dreading and half hoping somebody would eventually say out loud. I requested the transfer to overlap your zone, he said, 2 months ago, after the second call. I stood there with a wet blanket in my hands and my mouth open and nothing coming out of it. I know how that sounds, he said. I know it's not. I know there's a line, and I know I've been walking right up next to it every time dispatch sends me somewhere you already are, telling myself it's still mutual aid, still coincidence, still the job. But I wanted you to know it wasn't before you found out from someone else and decided I was something worse than honest. Here's where I think a person could reasonably land on either side, and I've turned it over more times than I'd like to admit since that night. Some people would call what he did sweet. A grown man quietly rearranging his professional life around the hope of seeing someone again, patient enough to let 3 separate emergencies pass before he said a word about it. Other people would call it a violation of something, a manipulation of a system meant for public safety, not private hope. And I understood that red too, standing there feeling the ground shift a little under a decision that had already been made without my input. I've asked myself which one I actually believe, and some nights I land in a different place than others. What I told him, standing on that bank with lightning, still flickering somewhere over the Catalinas, was the truth as I understood it in that moment. You should have told me on the first one. I know. Not the third. Not tonight. The first. I know, Marisol. I didn't have the nerve. And I believed him because I'd seen the man hold a stranger's shoulders steady through the worst 10 minutes of his life with a voice that never once shook. And here he was shaking over this instead. Over me, over the plain fact of asking for something for himself instead of doing his job. There's a particular kind of courage our line of work asks for, and it isn't the kind that gets you through floodwater. It's the kind it takes to say something true to a person who could just say no. We didn't become anything that night. I want to be honest about that too, because the tidy version would have us kissing in the rain like the whole scene was arranged for it, and that isn't what happened. What happened was I gave him my number on a strip of medical tape because it was the only paper either of us had, and told him if he wanted to see me again, he could do it without an engine number attached to the request. He called 2 days later, not a rerouted mutual aid call. Just him, asking if I wanted coffee on a Tuesday afternoon when neither of us was on shift, which turned out to be the strangest, most ordinary hour we'd ever spent together. No stretcher, no patient, no dispatch radio crackling on either hip, just 2 people who'd only ever known each other in emergencies, trying to figure out who they were without one. It's been 4 months now. He still runs Station 9, and his zone still, occasionally, honestly, overlaps mine. And when it does, I no longer wonder if it's coincidence, because we've both stopped pretending we need it to be. Sometimes I still hear a diesel engine 3 streets over, and my chest still does that complicated thing, and I've decided I don't especially want it to stop. Harold sent us a photo from the 1-year anniversary of his bypass, standing upright in his garden next to a gnome with a new arm glued on, and I keep it taped inside my locker at the station, next to a torn strip of medical tape with 10 digits still faintly legible on it, because some evidence you save on purpose.